Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Real Estate Stories. Today, we're going to chat briefly about township certificates of occupancy, or COs. What does that mean? What are they? When do you get them? Who's responsible for them? And we're going to share a couple of stories, and everything has a learning curve. So we are here today again with Michele Cohan.
Hello,
Welcome back,
everyone.
Michele. And I'm Robert Greenblatt. So certificates of occupancy. So here in the state of New Jersey, there's a couple of levels to this. And again, we get into this situation where terms are used interchangeably. Sometimes people say CO for certificate of occupancy. However, there's a lot of times where some towns only require a fire inspection, which is separate. That's a state law. So in the state of New Jersey, there is a fire inspection required when the property changes ownership. And that's pretty uniform, right, Michele?
Correct.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Those are the easy ones.
Yeah. We call them, those are kind of the easy ones. Although some recent changes to the law has made it a little more expensive for homeowners, because now they do require smoke detectors that have a 10-year lithium ion battery in that. Yeah, sealed. Thank you, Michele. Yeah. Sealed lithium ion battery, which basically means you can't pull the battery out to put in your remote control or the toys. And I guess I get it, right? I think at some point we were all guilty of that, to borrow a battery out of a smoke detector, or people take them out when they start to beep and they don't put them back in. So it is a safety thing. So no more $5 smoke detectors. Now that does vary from town to town. Some towns just basically say one on each level. Other towns can go as much as one on each bedroom and one on each level.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the fire piece of it. There's also a fire extinguisher and a carbon monoxide detector as part of that. Right. So those are, like, to use your words, Michele, those are the easy ones, right? Then we get into the certificate of occupancy. So again, every time a home is sold in the state of New Jersey, there's some kind of inspection required. The certificate of occupancy can vary wildly from town to town. The requirements can vary wildly. So Michele just had an experience. Actually, she's still living through it with a transaction. So I'm going to let her take over for a minute here and share a little story, because every transaction gives us something to learn.
Correct. And not even just a transaction. I think it was the speed, or I should say the origination of getting the CO. So to me, that's a biggie. So when to start getting your CO, whether you're the listing or buyer, depending what you're doing, get it right away. Don't wait.
Yeah, schedule that. Yeah, great point. Schedule that inspection right away, because rules are constantly changing anyway. Even if you think it's an easy one, we always tell our clients, and just to kind of package this, in most cases, in a traditional sale, it's the seller's side of the transaction that's responsible for it. There are some exceptions, of course, but in a traditional, typical sale, seller side would order that inspection from the local township. But do it right away, because it could take you a while to make those corrections that are required. And a lot of them could be multi-step processes. But here's one. Yeah. So go ahead, Michele. So what happened with this one? So it was ordered a little late, right? So in the process.
You're probably innocent, right?
Yeah.
I wanted
it was ordered.
Township, but this particular CO just had layers on top of layers on top of layers. Yeah. They came out, they did the inspection. Okay, that's good. But guess what? Now we have to add this to it. And it was a permit that was outstanding from the homeowner. So that had to be taken care of. Then they came back and they said, nah, now we need a survey for the grading. Why aren't you telling us this all at one time? This has now been over a month just to sort of mop up all of these issues and additional stuff that this township is asking for. So it's not that easy stuff, great, but now it's grading and pool permits and engineer. And we want to know whether or not the pool is okay size for the land that they have.
Is that it must be an above ground pool, right?
No.
No? So they didn't put a pool in this house without a permit, did they?
That's what they outstanding pool permit.
That's what that is. Holy cow. Right. So, note to self, don't slip it under the radar with anything major that you're doing to your house, because it will catch up with you.
But here's an easy one at the house. They went out and bought something from the big box store, Home Depot or Lowe's. Township said, because it's in the backyard and on the ground and semi-structure, guess what? Needed a permit.
Wow. And it's just bolted down, right? Outside.
That's it.
Yeah. And that's going to vary. Not every town is that tough, but I know the town that you're speaking of, and I have sold many homes there. And I've, one of the most common things, guys, that the townships pick up. And a lot of times as a homeowner, we just don't know any better. I mean, as agents, we know better, but as a regular homeowner, you may not know any better. A lot of people will finish their basements themselves, and most towns will catch that. And they're not going to stop you from selling your house, and they're not going to throw you in jail for it, but they are going to make you kind of backpedal and pull a bunch of permits, right? And
it's costly.
Go ahead. What was that, Michelle?
It could be costly.
Yes, it can cost a lot to get through that. I've sold homes in that same town where homeowner didn't know. He's like, I finished my basement 10 years ago. I don't know. And then not only do they have to file all those permits, they have to get a whole series of inspections for the basement. And they made that homeowner that I'm thinking of in particular cut holes in the walls so they could inspect the wiring. So I kind of understand it, but it doesn't make it any easier just because you understand it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you are close to the finish line on this one, right? Close to the finish line.
Every day it's something else.
Yeah. And here's another wild card. In some of the towns around here, guys, if you're an agent watching this, you may know this. But if you're a homeowner, please reach out. We can clarify some more details. Some of the towns around here require a new survey in order to obtain a certificate of occupancy. And the reason they do that, so here's an important piece of that. So in those transactions, what we do on our team is we make sure that the buyer is intending to get a survey, because surveys are probably $400 or $500. It really has no value to a seller at that point, but the seller needs that in order to pass that certificate of occupancy. So we put that in our contracts, and we try to make sure that the buyer is going to get a survey. And the reason they do that, anyone? The reason they do that, they want to see if you've made any exterior improvements, significant exterior improvements without a permit.
Right.
Yep. Whether you've put new concrete down, a patio. I mean, in an extreme situation, put an addition on the house, which that's extreme. But they want to see, did you put even an above ground pool and run some electric to it? So this conversation is not meant to scare anybody if you're thinking about selling your house. It's just about making sure that you're educated, and understand the process. So I had one recently that closed, and it was a short sale, so it was being sold as is. I was helping the seller. It was a tricky situation because we were actually getting pretty close to a sheriff sale. So it was stressful. The seller lived far away, and we were under the gun from a timeline standpoint. So in a short sale, which is as is, it is the buyer's responsibility to obtain those certificates which are needed to close. So what we found out through this process is that this particular house had open permits from the previous owner. Now, the client that I was helping, he probably owned it not terribly long, 7 or 8 years maybe. So somehow, some way, the township let it change hands, got a certificate of occupancy at that point. Nobody saw that there were open permits back then, by the way, for a finished basement, of course. And he didn't know anything about it. He's like, the house is like this. So he's like, I don't know what to do. So back and forth, and accolades to this awesome co-op agent that I worked with on this transaction. So if you're watching, you know who you are. Great job getting through that. But the township had to do a bunch of inspections. And through this process, I think the township inspector kind of figured out that the township dropped the ball several years ago by missing this. So they weren't terribly harsh on the buyer who was just trying to buy this house. And we were trying to get basically this financial burden off of the seller's shoulders. But they did send me a document along the way. Township faxed it to me, I think. No, I'm sorry, they did email it to me. And they showed me the code about this. And the code actually said that for each, you ready for this, Michele? Mm-hmm. For each day that the property is in violation of having this open permit,
oh no,
they can impose a $500 fine
a day
per day. So I was talking to the clerk of the township, and of course she said to me, she's like, this is what it says. It's very unlikely we're going to enforce that, but there could be some type of a fine. Yeah. I mean, it's been years. So fortunately, hey, look, we're dealing with humans here. People have a heart. They got their certificate of occupancy, and they actually waived all fines for this homeowner.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, I hadn't told you the story. It is amazing because the guy was in a tough spot, and it's really nice that the township looked at this scenario and basically said, okay, they probably dropped the ball 7 or 8 years ago when the home changed hands originally. And then they realized that the current seller moved out of state. He's in a tough spot. He has to get rid of his house. We're trying to kind of get somebody back into this house that's going to love it and take care of it. Sure. And so they looked at all this, and they, I guess, didn't want to push too hard, but they can, townships can be tough depending on the scenario. So I think that it's always good to approach these things with a positive attitude and a problem-solving attitude. And that's how we do it on our team. Any scenario we run into, mortgage, offer, contract, whatever it is, here's some options. What if we approach it this way? What if we approach it that way? And with the townships too, it's never going to get you anywhere giving people a hard time, right? Like that's just not going to help.
A little honey goes a long way. Just kind.
A little honey does go a long way. Exactly when we're dealing with this kind of stuff. So again, these stories are not to scare anybody, but there are some towns in our service area that can be a little bit on the tough side. A little bit on the tough side. And even the ones that aren't, like I have one right now, actually, that historically this town was a pretty easy town, and they pretty much just required a fire inspection. And now, as we're getting closer to closing, we find out they've added some layers to this, and there's some concrete that has to be replaced outside. It's getting done. Everything's going to be cool, but it's a surprise. So typically the best advice I give sellers in a traditional sale situation is, hey, we're going on the market next week. Hey, within the next week or so, why don't you stop into the township and get the preliminary inspection scheduled?
Right.
There are some towns where that sentence is that I'm stating is followed by, why don't you get the preliminary inspection scheduled, because you're probably going to fail. And it's not that they have a nasty house, but we know there's certain towns, there's certain things, codes have changed over time, and they just ask you to do it. It just has to get done, right? Anything else you want to add to that, Michele?
Like you can't beat yourself up about it. So realize it's going to happen. And like we just said in the beginning, just start early, guys. It makes it so cohesive for both the listing and the buying agent. It's so much more pleasant.
Yes, exactly. Part of our job is to eliminate speed bumps. Yeah. And sometimes I kind of use the metaphor that we're a quarterback in the entire process, right? So if concrete has to be replaced, I can't force the concrete guy to do that, but I can keep coaching you along and say, this is what we need to do. These are some options, and just kind of keep the team going, whether it's the buyer or seller, the title company, the mortgage person, the home inspector, all that. We're kind of quarterbacking the entire process for everybody.
Because you're sort of at the mercy of everybody. So it's not, you don't have the control of it. The only control you have is yourself, get it done. And then you hope that everybody kind of falls in line with you. But the sooner you do it, the better.
Absolutely. 100%. So thank you for joining us today, guys, on this quick video about certificates of occupancy. Once again, Michele Cohan, Robert Greenblatt. If you are interested in buying or selling a house, please feel free to reach out to us. Contact information is below. If you're a real estate agent and you're just kind of curious why we moved our team to EXP about a year ago now, with another video coming on that shortly, again, feel free to reach out for a confidential conversation. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good day. Thank you.